You point at something across the room, and your dog looks exactly where you're pointing. A chimpanzee, your closest living relative, sharing almost 99% of your DNA, usually won't. It'll look at your hand, maybe lick it. It has no idea what you're trying to tell it. And the reason for that gap says something stranger about evolution than almost anything else we know. Here's the assumption most people walk around with. Smarter animal, better at understanding humans. Chimpanzees can use tools, solve puzzles, recognize themselves in mirrors, outperform human toddlers on certain memory tasks. Dogs can't do most of that. So logically, chimps should read us better. They don't. And the reason isn't intelligence at all. It's something almost nobody thinks to ask about. What an animal was bred or evolved to care about. In 1998, comparative psychologist Brian Hare ran an experiment that became one of the most cited studies in animal cognition. He hid food under one of two cups, then pointed at the correct cup. Dogs followed the point and found the food, reliably, almost immediately, even puppies with zero training. Chimpanzees, despite being vastly more intelligent by almost every other measure, performed close to random chance. They simply didn't treat the point as meaningful information about the world. Wolves, dogs' closest wild relative, also failed the test, which means something happened to dogs specifically, not to canines in general, and not because of raw brainpower. So what actually happened? Roughly 15,000 to 40,000 years ago, depending on which genetic study you trust, wolves began associating with human settlements. The leading theory isn't that humans tamed wild wolves through force. It's that the wolves who were least afraid of humans, the ones who could tolerate proximity to campfires and scrap piles without panicking, survived and reproduced more successfully than the ones who fled. Generation after generation, this selected for one trait above almost all others: comfort reading and tolerating human behavior. Not problem-solving ability, not memory, social comfort with us, specifically. This is the part that reframes everything. Dogs didn't get smarter than wolves. In most cognitive categories, they're actually not that different, or sometimes worse. What changed was an entirely separate skill set, one evolutionary biologists call sociocognitive ability: reading faces, following gaze, interpreting tone of voice, understanding pointing as communication rather than just a moving hand. Dogs developed this not because they're generally brilliant, but because, for thousands of years, the dogs that were best at understanding humans got fed, protected, and allowed to breed. It was relentless selection pressure pointed at exactly one target. Chimpanzees never went through anything like that. They evolved alongside humans, sort of in the loosest sense, sharing a common ancestor roughly 6 million years ago. But they were never selected for paying attention to human communication. If anything, the chimpanzees that survived best were the ones good at navigating their own complex social hierarchies, deceiving rivals, forming alliances, competing for resources within their own troop. That's a different kind of intelligence, arguably a more sophisticated one in raw cognitive terms, just aimed somewhere else entirely. Here's a detail that makes this even stranger. In 2002, researchers compared dogs to hand-raised chimpanzees, chimps that grew up around humans constantly, fed by humans, living in human households. Even with that much exposure, the chimps still didn't reliably follow human pointing gestures the way dogs do, which rules out the simplest explanation, that dogs just spend more time around people. It's not exposure. It's something closer to a hardwired sensitivity, something selection built into the species over thousands of generations, not something an individual chimp can pick up through experience alone. Bonobos, often considered even more socially attuned than chimpanzees, show a bit more flexibility on these tasks, but still nowhere close to dogs. Even human infants, before they can speak, automatically follow pointing gestures within their first year of life. It seems to be one of the specific channels evolution opened up for humans and dogs simultaneously, almost like two different species converging on the exact same social skill from two completely different directions. Humans evolved it to coordinate within large cooperative groups. Dogs evolved it, more or less, to coordinate with us. This convergence shows up in other surprising ways. Dogs are unusually good at reading human emotional expressions, distinguishing a happy face from an angry one, even in photographs of people they've never met. They respond differently to a human voice that sounds upset versus calm, in ways most primates, including chimpanzees, simply don't bother to track. Some researchers describe dogs as having undergone a kind of domestication of the mind, not just the body, an entire cognitive system reshaped specifically around human social cues over thousands of years of cohabitation. And this is where the story circles back to something uncomfortable about intelligence itself. We tend to rank animals on a single scale, smart to dumb, as if cognition were one general resource. But what dogs demonstrate is that intelligence isn't really one thing. It's a collection of specialized tools, and evolution doesn't build whichever tool is best. in some abstract sense. It builds whichever tool gets an animal fed and kept alive in its specific environment. For 10,000 generations of wolves turning into dogs, the tool that mattered most wasn't solving puzzles. It was understanding us. So go back to that moment at the start of this video, you pointing across the room, your dog's eyes following the exact line of your arm without hesitation. It isn't a trick. It isn't obedience training in the way people usually imagine it. It's the end result of tens of thousands of years of one species being slowly, generation by generation, shaped into the single best non-human reader of human intention that has ever existed. Your closest genetic relative can't do it. Your dog never had to think twice. I'll see you in the next one.